In the past couple of days, there's been a lot of talk about Davante Adams potentially ending up back in Green Bay. And I did a video on it yesterday reacting to him, Davante Adams, on K. Adams, what he had to say. And Xavier McKinney responded to one of the clips yesterday on X. So the clip or the tweet here is from Up and Adams, K. Adams Show, says Davante Adams on the Packers' interest in free agent wide receiver T. Higgins. Quote, not a bad move. T is more than deserving. He can go to any team and be a number one. I'm excited to see what he does. And then Xavier McKinney comments under there, man, pull back up at Tay15 Adams, at Davante Adams. So basically telling Davante, hey, come back to Green Bay. And so I think, seeing the other things Davante Adams said, he clearly wouldn't be opposed to ending up back in Green Bay. And now that you have some of these, veteran players, guys who the Packers brought in last year, Xavier McKinney being the one right now, talking to Davante, trying to convince him to come to Green Bay, I think that there is, a little bit of, the potential of something like this actually happening. Now, it's a lot more complicated than just, Xavier McKinney wanting Davante Adams to be in Green Bay. But to see, one of the Packers leaders now really wanting it to happen, it does add a little bit more fuel to the fire. And before I go on to the next section here, looking at the contract, he did bring up T. Higgins there, and I had seen some reports, and what I saw was, I believe it was on ESPN, a writer had brought up the potential of T. Higgins going to Green Bay, and then I think it sort of got taken as a potential report, as if the Packers want T. Higgins. And so I'm not exactly sure if the Packers officially want this, or from my perspective right now, it seems like it's just sort of some noise right now that, people think that he could be a good addition here, which I am not opposed to. He's a very, very solid wide receiver, but I'm not sure. I haven't seen at least that there's official reports that the Packers are interested in T. Higgins. They very well could be, but that's what I wanted to cover right there. But now looking at the rest of this, of course, the question is, can the Packers, bring Davante in? Would the money make sense? Would Davante want to come to Green Bay? I talked about a lot of it yesterday. If you want to watch my full breakdown on pros and cons, I'll go into some of it here. But one thing I found interesting later yesterday was from Ian Rappaport in an article at NFL.com breaking down Davante Adams and his deal with the Jets and what could happen here. So let me read this from NFL.com, Ian Rappaport. Adams has been clear that he wants to play with his good buddy Rodgers, and if the quarterback is back in New York next season, it makes sense for them to play together. But Adams also kept his leverage to decide his future. When his eventual trade to the Jets was hanging in the balance, sources say Adams and his camp were adamant that his contract years for 2025 and 2026 remained untouched. The 2024 year was restructured for salary cap reasons, but the final 2 years of the 5-year, $141.25 million contract he signed with the Raiders were left alone. While not a big deal at the time, that decision gave Adams the leverage to decide his own fate after this season. If Rodgers isn't brought back or he decides to retire, Adams will get to decide his future. Here's why. Adams is on the books for $35.64 million for each year in 2025 and 2026. The Jets will never pay him that kind of money at age 33 and 34. All sides know those numbers will have to be redone. If Adams wants out, he can simply decline any offers to redo the deal and wait until they release him before free agency begins on March 12th, rather than carry that number into the new league year. Adams controls his own path. Obviously, the Jets would have preferred to have worked out an entirely redone contract with Adams, allowing him to stay for 2025 with no issues, or making his contract tradable if it didn't work out. So there is a very good possibility that if the Jets and Davante, don't want to stay put, when it comes to Davante's, side, the Jets could just full on release Davante Adams, which then would make it very interesting for the Packers, just because you could sign him to, a new deal. And personally, if the Packers could bring in Davante Adams for a, reasonable price, a more team-friendly type deal, I'm all for it, because I do think when you look at this Packers roster, with it being one of the youngest, or being the youngest team in the NFL, I do think that adding a more veteran presence could be beneficial, not just from his play and how good he is, because I still think he's playing at a very high level, and I think he may have a year or two left of this kind of production. We don't know when it's going to end, because lots of times when guys reach their mid-30s, at some point the play just sort of drops off. You look at tons of examples. Julio Jones, he's playing great, then all of a sudden the play just stops, being at that top tier level. But not only his play, but just his experience with the Packers, his experience in, NFC championships, playoffs. I do think having those kind of guys around can be beneficial. It sort of just takes, feel like the seriousness to another level. And I do think with the youth of the Packers roster, every year these guys are getting more experience. They've had, 3 playoff games now the past 2 years, anyone who's been here, for 2 seasons now. And so they are growing together, which I think is a benefit. But I don't think, adding some more veteran players would be a bad move. I think that just from a team culture perspective and then also Davante's talent could be very beneficial. And I still think the Packers have a solid receiver room, even without adding a receiver. They are very bad in the NFL when it comes to drops, some of the highest drop rates in the NFL. And so that has been a problem. I do think for the most part, they get open at some of the higher rates, especially Romeo Doubs, Christian Watson. But there are some concerns with Christian Watson and his ACL tear. Who knows, how long it'll be till he returns, if he'll miss the beginning of the season. And so I think having Davante here could be a smart decision. The biggest thing, what kind of money is he wanting? Would he be willing to take a team-friendly deal? He is near the end of his career. He may be, I would assume he's looking around wanting to win a Super Bowl. I think I think NFL players at all times are still trying to, maximize their income and maximize the money they make, because once they retire, of course they can make money elsewhere. But when some of your final years in the NFL, you may try to be, maximizing your amount of money you're bringing in. But Davante's already made a ton of money. Maybe he'd be willing to take a little less to come back to Green Bay. And as I said, if it's the right price, I think Davante back in Green Bay is a no-brainer. So it's going to be interesting to watch. This has really, become a big focus with Davante's comments. Now with Xavier McKinney being like, hey, Davante, pull up. And it's not up to, Xavier McKinney if Davante comes here, but I assume, having some of these veteran guys, talking to other NFL players, guys who could want to come here, they could be one of the differences in convincing guys to come. And I even saw a quote from Josh Jacobs after the Packers game, and I'll read it here. This is via Matt Schneidman, The Athletic. It says here, our locker room, is a quote from Jacobs. Our locker room is going to be different. We got some guys due for a contract this year. We don't know what that's going to look like, how that's going to shake up, but I know I'm going to try to get some guys here. So Josh Jacobs, being that veteran guy who was signed this past season, is going to be trying to bring in some more veteran players. And I think, having guys like that here who now can, help maybe guys like Jordan Love convince other guys to come to Green Bay. That definitely cannot hurt this team. And the Packers right now, if you look at their cap space going into 2025 per over the cap, 10th most cap space in the NFL, $50.3 million. So it's definitely, one of the better positions the Packers have been cap-wise for a while, with Aaron Rodgers' deal no longer here. And, the Packers don't have, they don't have too much money tied up at this moment. So we'll see. It's a possibility, no doubt. Do the Packers have enough to bring in Davante? Yes, I think they do. But it comes down to what happens with the Jets. Will they release him? Will Davante want to go elsewhere? There's so many factors that could stop him from coming here, but I wouldn't say it's completely out of the realm of possibilities. If you want more Packers content, feel free to subscribe down below. You can follow me on X at LukeBeller3 for more Packers content. But thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.